The door of the limousine sealed shut with a soft, expensive click, like a held breath, and the man across the seat said, "Play along." June Hartley had one hand still curled around the wrong door handle, and the other clamped to the strap of a carry-on that held 2 changes of clothes, a dented sample box, and the last of her dignity. Cold air poured from a vent somewhere near her knees. Outside, the July heat shimmered off the pickup lane in oily ribbons, and the glass had already turned it all into a silent film. Porters wheeling luggage, a family laughing, a security officer waving a cab forward. In here it smelled of leather conditioner and cut mint, and something darker underneath. Cedar, maybe. The kind of scent that cost more than her rent. "I'm sorry," she said. "What?" "Play along," the man repeated, quieter, as if the volume were the problem. "For 90 seconds. Then you can throw your drink in my face, if you like. There's sparkling water in the door." "I don't—" She turned to the window. A woman in a headset was jogging along the curb, scanning car doors, a tablet pressed to her chest. "This is the wrong car. There was a sign with my name on it, Hartley. A man was holding a sign that said Hartley, and this one says Ashford," he said. "I know. I watched you take the turn too early." She looked at him then, properly, for the first time. Dark hair pushed back off a forehead damp at the edges, a jaw that hadn't been shaved since morning, a linen jacket the color of weak tea thrown over a shirt open at the collar. He was younger than the voice suggested, mid-30s maybe, and he was not looking at her the way a man looks at a stranger he wants something from. He was looking at her the way a swimmer looks at a rope. "Let me out," June said. "In 90 seconds. Now, or I'll—" The window beside his shoulder filled with a face. The woman in the headset rapped her knuckle against the glass, 2 bright taps, and June's whole body went still, the way it did when a tray tipped and there was nothing to do but watch it fall. The man reached across without hurry and pressed a button. The window slid down 4 inches, no more. "Mr. Ashford," the headset woman's smile was doing hard labor, "we've been calling. Everyone's at the boathouse. Your grandmother has asked 3 times where you—" Her eyes cut to June, snagged, recalibrated. "Oh." "Sabine, this is—" He paused for exactly the length of a heartbeat. "June," June said, because her name was the one true thing she had, and she was too tired to invent another. "June," he agreed, as though he'd known it all along. "We'll be 5 minutes behind you. Tell my grandmother I brought someone." Sabine's smile changed shape entirely. It was, June thought, the smile of a woman who had just been handed a solution to a problem she had been carrying for weeks. "Of course," Sabine said. "Of course you did." She was already backing away, already talking into her headset. The window rose. The car pulled forward. 90 seconds are up," June said. "Let me out." "They will be," he said, "at the next light." And then, because she was staring at him with a look that had made line cooks put down their knives, he exhaled and rubbed a thumb hard along the inside of his wrist, a small worrying motion, and said, "Thank you. I mean that. You have no idea what you just did." "Neither do you," June said. "I don't even know your name." "Caleb," he said. "Caleb Ashford. And I owe you a debt I can't pay in 90 seconds. 3 hours earlier, June had believed the worst part of her day was already behind her. She had spent it in a convention hall 2 states away, under lights that turned every pastry gray, standing behind a folding table with a hand-lettered sign that read "Blue Door Bakery," and a tray of her almond and sea salt shortbread going soft in the heat. She had flown in on a fare she couldn't afford to pitch her little shop to a regional grocer's buying panel, because the lease renewal on the Blue Door had arrived in a stiff envelope with a number on it that had made her sit down on the flour bin and breathe through her mouth. She had not gotten the contract. A woman with a laminated badge and kind eyes had told her the shortbread was genuinely lovely, and that, unfortunately, the panel was consolidating vendors this cycle, which June had learned meant they'd already chosen someone bigger and were being polite about it. She had packed her samples back into the dented box, thanked everyone, and walked out into a heat that pressed on her like a hand. Here was the thing about June Hartley that she would never have said aloud. She was very good at being needed and very bad at being chosen. She could work a double and cover a sick colleague's shift, and remember that the man who came in every Thursday liked his coffee scalding, and his change counted into his palm, coin by coin. She had built the Blue Door out of exactly that: usefulness, reliability, the warm, competent yes. What she had never once managed was to be the thing someone reached for when they didn't need anything at all. Marcus had taught her that in the end. 2 years of her keeping his books and his hours and his spirits up, and then a woman with a gallery and a loft, and Marcus explaining gently on the sidewalk outside the shop that June was so steady that she was the kind of person you build a life on, and that he'd realized he wanted, just once, to feel swept off his feet instead. Steady. She'd carried the word home like a stone in her shoe. She was 29, and she made the best shortbread in a 40-mile radius, and she had never in her life been anyone's grand gesture. So she had landed at the airport in the thick gold light of a summer evening, jet-lagged and salt-stung and hollow, and she had walked out to the pickup lane looking for a man with a sign that said Hartley, a share ride she'd booked to save the cab fare. And she had seen a black car with a door already open and a driver already reaching for luggage, and she had been so tired that when a voice said, "Right this way," she had stepped toward the wrong shine of chrome and climbed in. And a man had closed the doors and told her to play along. "You're a caterer," Caleb said now, and it wasn't a question. He was looking at the box on her lap, at the flour ground permanently into the knee of her jeans, at her hands. "I own a bakery," June said. "One bakery. Owned. The verb is under review." She heard herself and stopped. She did not, as a rule, hand strangers the soft parts. "It doesn't matter. Pull over." "It's a 12-minute drive to a boathouse full of people who now believe you are my date," Caleb said, "and I would like to explain before you decide how much you hate me." "I've decided." "You haven't. You're too curious. You said the verb is under review, which means you notice how words work, which means you've already noticed I didn't lie to that woman. I said I brought someone. I did. You're someone." His mouth moved, not quite a smile. "It's the most honest thing I've said all week." June looked at him. The car glided past a marina where masts stood up like a bare winter forest against the water. Except it wasn't winter. It was the deep green middle of summer, and the light coming off the harbor was the color of clarified butter. A bead of condensation ran down the water bottle in the doorwell and dropped without a sound. "Talk fast," she said. He talked fast. "My grandmother is Eleanor Ashford. Tonight is her 70th birthday, and it is also, though the invitations don't say so, the night she intends to announce that I am marrying a woman named Priscilla Vane, whom I have met exactly 4 times, whose father sits on the board of the company my family has run for 60 years, and whom I do not love, do not dislike, and cannot marry." He said it evenly, the way a man reads a list of ingredients he's memorized. The engagement solves a problem for a great many people. None of those people is me. "So don't marry her," June said. "You're a grown man. Say no. I have said no 4 times. My grandmother does not hear no. She hears not yet. The only thing Eleanor Ashford has ever accepted as final is a fact she can't reverse. His thumb went to his wrist again, that small, hard worry. Tonight, if I walk in alone, she announces it, and 800 people applaud, and a photograph goes out, and then it is real. And unmaking it costs a woman I don't love her dignity in front of everyone she knows. If I walk in with someone, anyone, the announcement can't happen. Not tonight. It buys me time to do this properly, to end it in a way that doesn't put a person on the front of a page. The car slowed for a light. This was the light. June's hand found the handle. She thought about the stiff envelope on the flower bin. She thought about Steady. She thought, with a flare of something that surprised her, that no one had ever needed her for anything that wasn't a shift or a favor or a set of books. And here was a stranger who needed her to be, for one evening, the opposite of useful. To be a person he had simply, impossibly, chosen to bring. "This is insane," she said. "Completely," Caleb agreed. "You can open the door. I'll have Rennick take you anywhere you want to go. I mean that. There's no version of this where you're trapped." His eyes held hers. "But I'm asking, for one evening, and I don't ask for things well. My grandmother made sure of that." Up front, the partition was down a hand's width, and the driver, gray at the temples, unbothered as a stone, said, without turning his head, "For what it's worth, miss, in 11 years I have never once seen him bring a date. His grandmother's going to think he's ill." "Thank you, Rennick," Caleb said. "I'm on her side," Rennick said comfortably. "I just also enjoy watching him lose." The light went green. June did not open the door. She would spend a long time afterward trying to name what made her stay. It wasn't the money, though the car reeked of it. It wasn't pity. It was, she thought, that he'd said anyone and then looked at her as if she were not anyone at all. And that after a day of being consolidated out of a contract and folded up like a table and put away, being looked at like that had gone straight through the hollow place under her ribs and lit a pilot light she'd thought was out. 90 seconds got us to a light, she said. "How long is an evening?" 2 hours. Less, if you're bored. There's a signal. You touch your ear. I develop a sudden emergency. We leave. You never see any of these people again. He hesitated. "I'll pay you. Whatever the number is that saves the verb." And there it was. Usefulness. A transaction. The pilot light guttered. "No," June said, sharper than she meant. "If I do this, I don't do it for a check. I've spent my whole life being the sensible arrangement. I'm not going to spend tonight being one too." She surprised herself again. She seemed to be doing that a lot in this car. "I'll do it because you asked. Once. Not because you paid. Those are different things, and if you can't tell the difference, let me out now." Something shifted in his face, a small recalibration, the look of a man who has been handed a fact he didn't have a slot for. "They're different things," he said slowly. "All right. Then I'm asking, not buying. June." He said her name like he was testing whether it would hold weight. "Will you come to my grandmother's party and be a person I chose?" "For 2 hours," June said, "and I keep the box. I don't leave my samples in a stranger's car." "You keep the box." The not-quite smile came back, steadier this time. "What's in it?" "Shortbread, almond and sea salt." It went soft. Then it'll match everyone at the boathouse, Caleb said, and June laughed, one short, startled note that seemed to surprise them both. And outside the window the marina gave way to a long white gate, swinging open onto a drive lined with hydrangeas the size of dinner plates, blue as gas flames, heavy with the day's heat. "Rennick," Caleb said, "the long way in. She needs the story." "There's a story?" June said. "There has to be a story. My grandmother will ask how we met inside 90 seconds. She times these things. And if we say different things, we're finished." He turned toward her, one arm along the seat back, and now the ease was gone, and something more careful had taken its place, a man laying out a board. "So, we keep it near the truth. Truth is easier to carry. We met at the airport. That part stays. We met because I got in the wrong car and you kidnapped me." "We met at the airport," Caleb said, "which is true. And the rest we sand down. You dropped something, your box. I picked it up. We talked while you waited for a car that never came." He watched her. "You're a baker from out of town, in for the weekend. All true. You don't have to lie once tonight. Do you notice that? Everything I'm asking you to say is real. I only need you to leave out the last 20 minutes. "You've done this before," June said. "Not this, but this. Managed people with the truth so you never have to hold a lie." The gravel changed the sound of the tires, a low crush under them. Ahead, through the trees, June could see strings of warm light looping between two great oaks, and beyond them, water going pink at the edges as the sun let down. Music reached the car, a quartet, something with a cello in it, and under it the surf hush of a great many people talking at once. Her stomach dropped the way it had at takeoff. "That's a good read," Caleb said quietly. "Most people take longer than one car ride to make it." He was looking at her again with that rope and swimmer intensity. "It's also the thing I like least about myself, so we're even," June said. "I noticed a true thing about you. You noticed the verb is under review. Neither of us paid for it." She smoothed her palms down her thighs, felt the flower-stiff denim, and understood with a cold lurch exactly what she was wearing. "Caleb, I'm in jeans. I flew all day. I have shortbread in a box and my hair has been under an air vent for 12 minutes. There are 800 people out there in 200, he said. Sabine exaggerates. And you look like the only real thing that's arrived here in a decade, which is precisely the problem I'm trying to solve." He said it plainly, not as flattery, the way he might have named the weather, and June felt heat climb her neck that had nothing to do with July. "Don't do that," she said. "Do what?" "Say things like that as if they're facts." "They usually are," Caleb said, "which is why nobody believes me." The car rolled to a stop under the oaks. Through the window, a footman in shirt sleeves was already moving toward the door, and beyond him the party opened up like a lit stage. White tents, tall candles and glass, a lawn running down to a boathouse whose windows threw gold rectangles across the darkening grass. And standing at the top of the boathouse steps, small and straight and dressed in dove gray, a woman had turned to watch the car, one hand raised to shade eyes that even from here June could feel land on her like a weight. "That's her," June said. It wasn't a question. "That's her." Caleb's hand found the door handle and stopped there. For 1 second, just one, the managed ease dropped entirely off his face, and she saw underneath it something she recognized because she'd worn it herself on a sidewalk 2 years ago while a man explained that she was steady. The face of a person braced to be found insufficient by someone whose approval was the only currency that had ever counted. Then it was gone, folded away, and he was Caleb Ashford again, unhurried, dry, in control. "Touch your ear and we leave," he said. "Any time. I mean it." "I know," June said, and was startled to find that she did. The footman opened the door. Warm air rolled in, thick with cut grass and citronella and the green, rot-sweet smell of hydrangeas past their peak, and under it wood smoke, and under that the wide, cool breath of the water. The cello swelled. Somewhere a woman laughed too brightly. "June Hartley, baker, owner verb under review. Wearing flour and 13 hours of travel and a stranger's need like a borrowed coat," put her hand into Caleb Ashford's offered palm and felt his fingers close around it, steadying, certain, and thought, "I have made a mistake, and I am not going to stop making it." "One more thing," Caleb murmured as they climbed the steps toward the gray woman at the top, his voice pitched under the music for her alone. "Whatever she says to you, and she will say something, she always says something, don't let her see it land. She reads people for a living. She'll test you in the first minute." "How?" "I don't know. That's the point. She never uses the same knife twice." His hand tightened once, an apology in advance. "Ready?" And before June could answer, before she could touch her ear or take back her hand, or remember that 4 hours ago the worst thing in her life had been a lost contract and a stiff envelope, Eleanor Ashford came down 2 steps to meet them, took June's flower-stiff hand in both of her cool, dry ones, looked into her face with eyes the exact pewter of the sea behind her, and said, in a voice like a blade going into a cake so cleanly the cake doesn't yet know it's been cut, "So you're the reason my grandson is 40 minutes late to my birthday. How lovely. Tell me your name, dear, and tell me the truth. Did he pay you, or do you actually imagine you're going to marry him?" The music played on. 200 faces began, very slowly, to turn. And June, with Caleb's hand gone rigid around hers, and every exit suddenly behind a wall of people, opened her mouth to answer. June did not let it land. She felt it, of course. The words went in exactly where they were aimed, into the soft place under the ribs that Marcus had found, and a buying panel had found, and 13 hours of travel had left undefended. But June had spent 8 years behind a counter, learning that a customer who came in swinging was almost always a customer who had been hurt somewhere else that morning, and the only way to survive them was to refuse the fight they were offering. So she looked into Eleanor Ashford's pewter eyes, and she smiled the smile she gave the man who counted his change coin by coin, warm and unhurried and entirely her own, and she said, "He didn't pay me. And I've known your grandson for exactly an hour, Mrs. Ashford, so I haven't decided anything about marrying him. He hasn't earned it yet." For 1 heartbeat, nothing moved. The cello held a long note out over the water. Beside her, June felt Caleb's hand go from rigid to something else. Not loose, but caught. The grip of a man who has watched a glass tip and land upright. Then Eleanor Ashford laughed. It was a short, dry, surprised sound, entirely unlike the blade that had come before it, and it turned 3 nearby faces toward them with open astonishment. "He hasn't earned it," Eleanor repeated. She still had June's flower-stiff hand in both of her cool ones, and now she turned it over, once, glancing at the flower ground into the knuckles, the small, pale burn scar along the side of one finger, the short, unpainted nails. She read the hand the way another woman might read a letter. "No," she said, "I don't suppose he has. What is your name, dear? Your real one. I'll know if you reach for a second. June Hartley. And what do you do with these hands, June Hartley, that my grandson found more interesting than being on time for me? I bake, June said. Bread, mostly. Shortbread when I'm showing off. She tilted her chin at the box still clamped under her arm. I brought some. It went soft in the car. I'd have made a fresh batch if I'd known I was coming, but your grandson didn't give me much notice. Something flickered far back in Eleanor's eyes. Interest, or its cold cousin, assessment. She released June's hand at last. No, she said. He wouldn't have. She turned that pewter gaze on Caleb, and her voice changed key, dropped into something private and edged. 40 minutes, Caleb. Sabine has been holding the quartet on the same 3 movements like a woman holding a lift. Priscilla has been on the terrace since 7. Then Priscilla has had a lovely view of the sunset, Caleb said, which is more than most people get on a Saturday. Don't. One word. Quiet. And it stopped him the way a hand on the chest stops a man. Eleanor stepped back up onto the top stair so that she stood above them both, small and straight in her dove gray, and for a moment the party behind her, the tents, the candles, the 200 turning faces, arranged itself around her like a court around a throne. You will bring your baker inside, she said, because I will not have a scene on my lawn on my 70th birthday. You will feed her and dance with her if the mood takes you, and we will speak later, you and I, about the difference between a gesture and a decision. Her eyes returned to June, and gentled by a degree that was somehow more frightening than the blade. You're welcome here, Miss Hartley, genuinely. I always did prefer the ones who bring something to the ones who only take. She paused. It's just that they so rarely stay. And she turned, dove gray against the gold light, and went up into her party, and the faces turned with her, and the cello, finally, mercifully, moved on to a 4th movement. June let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Beside her, Caleb had not moved. You said she'd test me in the first minute, June murmured. You didn't say she'd win. She didn't win. Caleb was looking at his grandmother's retreating back with an expression June couldn't parse, something between admiration and grief. You just watched her lose and be gracious about it, which she does perhaps twice a year. I've never seen her turn a hand over before. She likes you. He said it as if reporting a strange weather event. That's a complication. You wanted her to like me. That's the whole... I wanted her stopped, Caleb said. There's a difference. When Eleanor dislikes something, she attacks it, and you can see the attack coming. When she likes something, she plans for it. I'd rather see the knife. He seemed to hear himself, and the dry mask slid back down over the raw thing underneath. Come on, there's a bar under the near tent that does a passable lemonade, and the sooner you're holding a glass, the sooner you look like you belong to the evening instead of to the airport. They went up into the light together, and June's hand was still in his, and neither of them had let go. And she noticed that, and noticed that he noticed, and neither of them said anything about it at all. The near tent smelled of crushed lime and beeswax candles and, faintly, of the citronella burning in copper pots at the edges to keep the summer bugs off the guests. June took a lemonade in a heavy cut glass that fit her palm like it had been made for it, and she drank half of it in one long swallow, before she remembered she was supposed to be a woman who belonged here. And then she didn't care, because it was cold and sharp and tasted of actual lemons, and it was the first thing that had gone right all day. Better? Caleb said. Don't narrate me. Noted. He steered her, one hand light at the small of her back, through a shifting field of linen and silk and men in summer-weight jackets who all seemed to know him and none of whom he stopped for. June caught fragments as they passed. A woman saying the phrase "third quarter" as though it were a curse. A man laughing about someone's boat. The clink of ice and the murmur of 100 conversations, all pitched to the same soft, moneyed register. It was, she realized, the sound she'd heard from the car and mistaken for surf. People who never had to raise their voices because someone was always leaning in to hear them. "There she is," a voice said, bright and carrying. "The mystery!" The woman who stepped into their path was perhaps June's age, in a column of pale green silk that caught the candlelight, with dark hair swept up off a long neck, and a face that photographed, June thought, one of those faces built for the front of a page. She was holding 2 glasses of champagne, and she offered neither of them. "Priscilla," Caleb said. His hand, June felt, went still against her back. "Caleb." Priscilla Vane's smile was flawless, and did not travel up to her eyes, which were doing exactly what Eleanor's had done at the top of the stairs, reading, filing, pricing. "You're 40 minutes late, and you've brought a stranger to your grandmother's birthday, and my father has been standing by the boathouse for an hour with a speech in his pocket. I'd ask what you were thinking, but I've known you long enough to know the answer is you weren't." She turned the smile on June, and it dropped a full degree of warmth. "I'm sorry, we haven't met, which is remarkable because I thought I'd met everyone who mattered to this family. You are?" "June," June said. "June." Priscilla let the name sit there, weightless, disposable. "And how do you know Caleb, June?" Here it was, the first real test, the one Caleb had built a story for in the car. And June opened her mouth to say, "We met at the airport. You dropped your box." All true, and found that Priscilla had already turned back to Caleb as though June's answer were a receipt she didn't need. "Because the thing is," Priscilla went on, lower now, the bright party voice folding away into something flatter and more honest. "I don't actually mind, Caleb. I want you to understand that. I'm not a jealous woman, and I'm not a stupid one, and I know exactly what tonight is and exactly what it isn't. You don't love me. I don't love you. My father wants a seat, and your grandmother wants a wall around this company before she's too tired to build one, and you and I are the mortar." She sipped her champagne. "That was always fine with me. It's a good arrangement. I'd have been a very good wife to you, in the way that matters, which is the way that has nothing to do with feelings." Her eyes went to June, cool and clear. "So I don't mind the baker. Truly. Bring 10 bakers. What I mind is that you'd let my father stand by that boathouse and be made to look small in front of 200 people who watched him build his half of this. That was unkind. And you are a great many things, Caleb Ashford, but until tonight I'd never have said you were unkind." She set one of the champagne glasses down on the tray of a passing waiter without looking, turned, and was gone into the crowd, pale green swallowed by candlelight. June exhaled. She knows. She's always known. Caleb's jaw had gone tight. Priscilla's the only honest person in this entire tent. That's the part nobody tells you about arranged things. Sometimes the person you're arranged with is decent, and that's worse, because then the cost of saying no has a face. He rubbed his thumb along the inside of his wrist, hard, that small, worrying motion June was beginning to recognize as the place his composure leaked. "She's right about her father. That's the part I hadn't." He stopped. "I thought about Eleanor. I thought about the photograph. I didn't think enough about the man by the boathouse." "Then go think about him," June said. "Now, while she's given you the opening. Go and find her father and say something true to him before the story sets." Caleb looked at her. You'd have made a frightening executive. I run a bakery on 4 hours of sleep. Same skills, worse pay. She nudged him. Go, I'll hold the tent up. He went, but not before he did something June didn't expect, something that undid a little of the careful distance she'd been keeping since the car. He lifted her hand, the one he'd been holding on and off since the steps, and he pressed his mouth to the back of it, brief and dry, and entirely for the benefit of the 200 watching faces, and murmured under it, for her alone, "Thank you. Again. I'm going to owe you for a decade." And then he was gone, through the linen and the silk, and June stood alone under the citronella light with a lemonade going warm in her hand and the ghost of his mouth on her knuckles, and the absolute certainty that she was in a great deal of trouble. "He's never done that either, you know." June turned. The man who had spoken was old, older than Eleanor, with a shock of white hair and a rumpled seersucker jacket, and a glass of something amber that he held like a man who'd been holding one for 60 years. He was sitting alone at the edge of the tent in a wicker chair, one leg crossed over the other, watching the party the way a farmer watches weather. "Done what?" June said. "Kissed a hand for show. Boy hates a performance. Gets it from his mother. Not that anyone in this family will say her name above a whisper." He gestured with the amber glass at the empty chair beside him. "Sit down before somebody prices your shoes, dear. You're a baker. I can smell the flour from here, and I mean that as the highest compliment I've paid a guest all night. I'm Gideon, Eleanor's brother. The one they keep in the corner with the good whiskey, so I don't say anything true into a microphone." June sat. Up close, Gideon's eyes were the same pewter as his sister's, but where Eleanor's read and priced, his simply watched, amused, and a little sad. "You're not what I expected either," June said. "No one ever is, when you get them out of the light." He turned the glass slowly in his spotted hand. "Let me tell you something, June the baker, because you've got a kind face, and you're about to need it. My sister is going to spend the rest of this evening deciding whether you're a threat or an asset. She'll be perfectly lovely to you the whole time she decides. And the thing you have to understand about Eleanor, the thing the boy has never once let himself understand, which is why he's tearing himself in half over a woman in a green dress he doesn't love, is that Eleanor is not cruel. She's frightened. She has been frightened for 40 years, ever since—" He stopped himself, drank, set the glass down. "Ever since she had to hold this whole thing together alone, and learned that the only safe thing is a thing that can't leave. That's why she likes arrangements. An arrangement can't fall out of love and walk down a sidewalk." His eyes came up to June's, sharp beneath the white brows. "You know something about sidewalks, I think. It's on your face." June said nothing. The cello had started something slow. "There's a thing nobody's told the boy," Gideon went on, more quietly, and June leaned in without meaning to, because there is a particular register an old man uses when he's about to hand you the one card he's been holding all night. About why Eleanor wants the Vane marriage so badly, so fast, this summer and not next. It isn't the board. The board's a story she tells because the truth is a thing she'd rather cut out her tongue than say in a tent. And it isn't Caleb's happiness, whatever she believes. It's Gideon. Eleanor's voice, from behind them, was pleasant and final. She had crossed the grass without a sound, dove gray in the candlelight, and she laid one cool hand on her brother's shoulder. Affection and a leash in the same gesture. "You're monopolizing our guest, and you've had enough of Arthur's whiskey to start improving on history." "I never improve on it, Elle. Gideon didn't look up at her. "I just declined to sand it down the way you do." But he picked up his glass and rose, unsteady, courtly, and bowed to June from the waist. "A pleasure, June the baker. Do come back to this family when it isn't performing. There's a better one underneath, if you dig." And he ambled off toward the boathouse, humming, leaving June alone with Eleanor and the enormous, unfinished shape of the thing he hadn't said. Eleanor settled into the wicker chair her brother had left, arranging her skirt, and for a moment the two of them simply watched the party. The dancers starting up on the boards, the candles guttering, Caleb visible at the far edge in earnest low conversation with a heavy-set silver-haired man who had to be Priscilla's father. "He's a romantic, my brother," Eleanor said at last. "It's a luxury. Someone in every family gets to be one, and someone has to pay for it, and we don't usually let the two people meet." She turned her head. "What did he tell you?" "That you're frightened," June said. She heard herself say it and didn't take it back. Not cruel, frightened. Something moved across Eleanor's face. Quick, deep, gone. "Did he?" she said softly. "Well, he's not wrong, which is his most irritating quality." She looked out at Caleb by the boathouse, and her voice, when it came again, had lost its blade entirely, and that was the most dangerous thing June had heard all night. "Let me tell you what I see, Miss Hartley, since we're being frightened at each other. I see a young woman who was tired and sad about something before she ever got in that car. No, don't. It's on you the way flowers on your hands. I don't need the details. And I see my grandson, who has spent 34 years being careful, doing the single least careful thing I have ever watched him do, in public, on the one night it costs the most." She folded her hands. "And I find myself unable to decide whether you are a very kind young woman who is being used, or a very clever one who is doing the using. Both would explain everything I've seen. Only one of them ends with my grandson unhurt." "I'm not using him," June said. "No," Eleanor agreed. "I don't think you are. That's what worries me. A woman using him I'd know how to remove." She rose, smooth as water despite her years, and looked down at June with the pewter eyes gone almost gentle. "You should understand what you've walked into, dear, because he won't tell you, and my brother will only make it sound like poetry. There is a reason this marriage has to happen this summer. It is not a reason Caleb knows, and when he finds it out, and he will, because you can't keep a thing like this in a house this size, he is going to have to choose between the woman he doesn't love and the family that raised him, and whoever is standing next to him when that happens is going to get cut by the falling glass." She smoothed her sleeve. "I've watched a great many people stand next to this family at the wrong moment. I'd rather you weren't one of them. Consider that a kindness. I don't offer many, and I'm told they don't look like kindnesses at all." And she was gone, up toward the lights, leaving June alone at the edge of the tent with a warm lemonade, a phantom kiss on her hand, and the second person in 10 minutes to tell her there was a secret at the bottom of this house that even Caleb didn't know. June found she was on her feet without deciding to be. She set the glass down. Across the lawn, Caleb had finished with Priscilla's father. The silver-haired man was nodding, slowly, not warm, but no longer cold. And June understood that whatever Caleb had said to him had worked, had bought back some of the dignity Priscilla had accused him of spending. He looked up, found June across the crowd, the way he'd found her in the wrong car, and started toward her. And even from here she could see the question forming. What did they say to you? She didn't get to answer it, because at that moment the quartet stopped mid-phrase, a jarring, deliberate silence, and a spoon rang against crystal somewhere up by the boathouse steps. 3 bright chimes, and a voice that could only be Sabine's called out, warm and amplified. "Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd gather, Mrs. Ashford would like to say a few words." And the 200 faces began to drift, glasses in hand, toward the lit steps where Eleanor Ashford now stood, with a microphone in one hand and Priscilla's silver-haired father moving up to stand at her shoulder. And June saw Caleb stop dead in the middle of the lawn, halfway to her, his whole body going rigid, the way it had gone rigid at the top of the stairs. "She said tonight was off," June breathed, though no one could hear her. "He said if he brought someone, she couldn't—" But Eleanor was smiling out at her guests, and she had not looked once at her grandson. And when she lifted the microphone, her voice carried clean and lovely across the darkening lawn, out over the water, over the candles and the citronella and the 200 upturned faces. "Thank you all," Eleanor said, "for coming to watch an old woman turn 70. I promise not to make a speech. I only want to say something about family, about what it costs to keep one, and what I've decided tonight that I'm no longer willing to lose." Her pewter eyes moved, at last, and found Caleb frozen on the grass, and then moved on, deliberate, to June at the edge of the tent, and held there for one endless, unreadable second. "Because I've had a surprise this evening," Eleanor went on, "and at my age, surprises are rarer than they used to be, and I've learned to pay attention when one arrives in the wrong car." The lawn was very quiet. Somewhere the water lapped at the boathouse pilings, and June, with every face beginning to turn toward her, and Caleb too far across the grass to reach her hand, felt the whole evening tip like a tray going off the edge of a table, and understood that Eleanor Ashford had just picked up the knife she never used twice, and that no one, not Caleb, not Priscilla, not Gideon in his corner with his amber glass, had the first idea which way she was about to cut. The music did not come back. Eleanor let the silence do her work, the way June had once watched a very old chef let a kitchen go quiet before he spoke, so that every line cook would strain to hear him and blame himself if he missed a word. 200 people held their glasses at the same height. Candle flames leaned in the small wind coming off the water, and the citronella smoke bent with them. And June stood pinned in the pewter of Eleanor's gaze, while every face on the lawn tried to work out why the old woman was looking at a baker in flour-stiff jeans. "I had a speech," Eleanor said. "Arthur wrote me a lovely one. It thanked the board. It thanked the Vane family who have been so generous with their time and their patience this year." A ripple of polite laughter. The silver-haired man beside her inclined his head, gracious, waiting for the sentence he had come for. "It was going to end," Eleanor went on, "with an announcement. Some of you know which one. Some of you have known for weeks, which tells me my staff gossip as beautifully as they pour." More laughter, warmer now. June felt Caleb, 30 feet away across the grass, stop breathing. "But a strange thing happened tonight." Eleanor turned the microphone a degree, and her voice softened into something that carried further than shouting ever could. "My grandson was late. Caleb is never late. In 34 years, that boy has never once made me wait, and tonight he made me wait 40 minutes, and when he finally came up my steps, he was holding the hand of a woman none of us has ever met." Her eyes found June again and stayed. "A woman who got into the wrong car at an airport and somehow arrived in exactly the right place. I asked her on my own steps whether he'd paid her to be here. A gasp somewhere, a delighted, scandalized murmur. And she told me he hadn't earned her yet. The laugh that went through the crowd this time was real and startled, and it turned 200 faces from suspicion to delight in the space of a breath. June felt her cheeks go hot as the copper pots. "So I find I don't want to make my announcement tonight," Eleanor said. "I'm 70 years old, and I have decided that at 70, a woman is allowed to be curious instead of certain, just for one weekend." She lifted her glass. "We'll gather again on Sunday, all of you. Come back Sunday. And by then the things that need deciding will be decided, properly, the way this family decides things. And I hope Miss Hartley will stay with us until then, and let us find out whether my grandson has earned anything at all." The pewter eyes glittered. 2 surprises, and to the ones brave enough to arrive in the wrong car. The lawn drank the toast. Glasses rose, light caught in 200 rims at once, and the applause came down soft and general and warm. And Sabine was already signaling the quartet, and the cello swept back up into something bright, and it was, June understood distantly, a triumph. Caleb had wanted the announcement stopped. It was stopped. He had wanted time. He had time. So why did his face, when she finally found it across the grass, look like a man watching the tide come in over a road he needed to walk? He reached her before the applause had finished. His hand closed around her elbow, light but urgent, and he steered her out of the tense mouth and along the edge of the lawn toward the dark, away from the candles, and only when they were past the last copper pot and the grass began to slope down toward the boathouse did he stop and let her go. "You're welcome," June said, "in case you were going to lead with that." She didn't stop it. Caleb's voice was low and fast. "June, listen to me. She didn't stop anything. She moved it. She took an ambush I could have interrupted and turned it into a deadline in front of 200 witnesses. Sunday. She's given herself 2 days and made the whole county the audience, so that if I don't have an answer she likes, saying no isn't a private no anymore. It's breaking a promise she just made on her own birthday." He dragged a hand back through his hair. "She's better than me. She's always been better than me. I brought a stranger to break her plan, and she used the stranger to build a better one." June looked back up the slope. Under the strung lights, Eleanor had descended into her guests and was being kissed on both cheeks, small and straight and luminous, the queen of the whole gold evening. Priscilla's father stood a little apart, and his face was not the face of a man who had been thwarted. It was the face of a man who had been told to wait, and did not mind waiting, because he had counted the cards and liked his hand. "And she wants me in the house," June said slowly, "where she can watch me for 2 days. "Where she can take you apart at her leisure." Caleb turned to her, and in the dimness away from the candles, the managed mask had slipped entirely, and what was under it was raw and tired and much younger. "I'm sorry. This is so far past anything I had the right to ask. You did the 90 seconds. You did the 2 hours. You did more than that. You handled her. You handled Priscilla. You handled a party full of people who eat strangers for entertainment. And every part of me that isn't a coward is telling me to put you in the car with Rennick right now and send you home before my grandmother makes you a chess piece too." Down at the bottom of the slope, the water moved against the boathouse pilings with a slow, wooden knock, 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 and the smell came up off it, cold and green, and faintly of creosote and warm summer weed, the smell of a harbor letting go of the day's heat. June breathed it and felt, absurdly, calmer than she had all evening. "And the part of you that is a coward?" she said. Caleb was quiet a moment. A moth blundered against the last lit window of the boathouse. A soft, repeated tick. "The part of me that's a coward wants you to stay," he said. "Because when you were up on those steps telling my grandmother she hadn't earned it, that was the first time in a year I wasn't the only person in a room who could see the whole board. And I'm so tired of being the only one who can see the board, June. You have no idea." They were standing very close. She had not noticed them arriving there. The strung lights were behind him, so his face was mostly shadow and the gleam of one eye, and she could feel the warmth coming off him in the cooling air, and the space between them had gone thin and charged as the moment before a summer storm breaks over the water. His gaze dropped once to her mouth and came back up, and she watched him decide not to, watched the decision cost him, and something in her chest turned over slow and warm and unwelcome. "Don't," she said, for the second time that night, though her voice had lost all its edge. "I wasn't going to." He stepped back half a pace, and the air came apart between them, and she could breathe again. "I don't kiss women I've conscripted. It's a rule I made up 11 minutes ago, and I'm very committed to it." She laughed, the second time, and it came easier than the first. "Caleb, what did she mean? On the steps she told me there's a reason the marriage has to be this summer, and it isn't the board, and it's a reason you don't know. And Gideon started to tell me the same thing, and she stopped him with one word. 2 people in your family have now told me there's a bottom to this house that you can't see." She searched his shadowed face. "Is that true? Is there something you don't know?" For a long moment he didn't answer, and the boathouse water knocked at its pilings, and up the hill a woman laughed too brightly at something that wasn't funny. "There's always something you don't know," Caleb said finally, "in a family that treats information like money. I've assumed the deadline was the Vane board seat. Priscilla's father wants it locked before the autumn vote, and a marriage locks it." He said it evenly, but June heard the hairline crack running under the words. "But my grandmother doesn't move fast for a board seat. She's outlasted 6 board seats. If she's rushing—" He stopped, and his thumb went to the inside of his wrist, and this time he didn't seem to notice he was doing it. "If she's rushing, it's because something has a clock on it that I haven't been shown. And she just stood in front of 200 people and put a clock of her own on top of it, which means she wants me looking at Sunday so I don't look at whatever's underneath." He exhaled. "Gideon knows. Gideon always knows. And he's the only one she can't fully control, which is why they keep him in the corner with the whiskey." "Then let me talk to Gideon," June said. "She stopped him because you were across the lawn and it was a performance. But she can't watch him all weekend, and she can't watch me. If I'm in the house, if you're in the house, you become the thing she takes apart to stop me finding out." Caleb's jaw set. "No, I won't buy myself information with you. That's exactly the kind of arithmetic this family does, and it's the kind I promised myself I'd never—" "It's not your arithmetic to do," June said. "It's mine. You asked me for 2 hours, and I gave them to you because you asked. Nobody's asking now. I'm offering. Those are different things, remember? You seemed to think it mattered a great deal in the car." She held his gaze. "I'm choosing this. Let me choose it." And there it was again. That small recalibration in his face, the look of a man handed a fact he had no slot for. He opened his mouth to argue, and closed it. And June had the sudden clear sense that no one in 34 years had offered Caleb Ashford anything he hadn't first had to secure, arrange, or earn, and that he genuinely did not know what to do when a person simply gave. "All right," he said, quietly, like a man stepping off a curb into water he can't see the bottom of. "Then stay, and I'll—" He stopped, and something crossed his face, quick and cold. "I need to find Rennick. There's a thing I set in motion earlier that I need to unset before it—" He didn't finish. He looked, for one strange second, almost afraid. "Wait here. Or better, go up and find Gideon while she's occupied. I'll come back for you." He went up the slope fast, cutting between the tents, and June watched him go and did not yet understand what he'd meant about a thing set in motion, though she would understand it entirely within the half hour, and wish she'd asked. Gideon was not hard to find. He had migrated, as old men at parties do, to the exact center of the loudest crowd, where he could be alone in plain sight. He saw June coming, and his whole rumpled face rearranged itself into welcome, and he patted the wicker chair that had somehow followed him. "June the baker returns," he said. "I heard my sister toast you. She hasn't toasted a stranger since the year the river froze. You've made an impression, dear, and impressions on Eleanor are like cutting your name in a tree. Flattering, permanent, and slightly more painful than you expected." "You were going to tell me something," June said, sitting, keeping her voice low under the music, "before she came. About why she wants this marriage so fast, this summer. You said it isn't the board. She said the same thing 5 minutes later, almost word for word. So either you're both improving on history, or you're both telling the truth." Gideon turned his amber glass, and for a moment the amusement went out of his eyes and left only the sad old watchfulness underneath. "You don't let go of a thing once your teeth are in it," he said. "Good. He needs that. He's all grip and no teeth, that boy. Holds on to everything and bites nothing." He glanced up the lawn, found his sister deep in a knot of guests, and leaned in, and the register of his voice dropped to the one he'd used before, the one that meant a card was coming down off the top of the deck. "Do you know why my sister is frightened of things that can leave?" he said. "I told you she is, and I told you it's 40 years old, and you looked like a woman who'd file it away and not push, which is exactly why I'm going to push it at you myself." He drank. 40 years ago, Eleanor had a daughter, Caleb's mother, Rosalind, bright as a struck match and twice as inclined to burn the house down. And Rosalind fell in love with a man Eleanor had decided was unsuitable. Not cruel, not poor even, just uncontrollable. A man who couldn't be arranged. And Eleanor did what Eleanor does. She squeezed. She used the money and the name and the pressure, all of it, to make the thing impossible. He turned the glass. And Rosalind, being her mother's daughter, chose the man over the money, and walked down a very long driveway with one suitcase, and did not come back. Not for the reconciliations, not for the funerals that came later. Not once. His voice had gone very quiet. She sends a card at the turn of every year. No return address. Eleanor keeps every one in a drawer she thinks nobody knows about, and she has spent 40 years building a family so tightly bound that no one can ever do to her again what her own child did. Walk down a driveway and simply be gone. June sat very still. Up the hill the cello sang, and the candles burned, and 200 people who knew nothing about a drawer full of cards laughed at each other's jokes. "Caleb doesn't know that," she said, "that his mother left over exactly this, over a marriage his grandmother tried to arrange." "Caleb knows his mother left. He was a young man by then, grown at university, old enough to understand and too young to stop it, which is the worst age to lose someone to a quarrel." Gideon's eyes were wet at the rims, an old man's easy tears. What Caleb doesn't know is that Eleanor sees him and Rosalind as the same story running twice. He doesn't know that every time he says no to Priscilla, my sister hears her daughter's footsteps going down that driveway. She isn't rushing this marriage for a board seat, June. She's rushing it because she has convinced herself that if she can get Caleb safely, permanently bound to something before he does what his mother did, before he falls in love with someone uncontrollable and walks, then she'll finally have built a family that can't leave her. He looked at June, and the sad amusement came back, terrible and gentle. And then, 3 hours ago, her grandson arrived, 40 minutes late, holding the hand of an uncontrollable woman in flower-stiff jeans who told her he hadn't earned her yet. "Do you see, dear? Do you see what you walked into? You are not a threat to the marriage. You are the driveway. You are the exact shape of the thing she has spent 40 years building a wall against." The music seemed to come from very far away. June's hands had gone cold around nothing. "That's why she wants me in the house," she said. "Not to take me apart, to study the thing she's afraid of, to learn whether I'm real." "To learn whether you'll last," Gideon said. "Because if you're a 2-hour arrangement, she can wait you out, and by Sunday there's a marriage and the wall holds. But if you're real—" He shrugged, a small courtly lift of one seersucker shoulder. "If you're real, then everything she's built is standing on sand. And she'd rather know now, over one weekend, on her own ground, than find out later on a driveway." He set his glass down with the care of a man who has learned exactly how much he can carry. "I've handed you the whole thing now. What you do with it is yours. But I'll tell you what I told the boy, years ago, when he still listened to me. A wall built to keep out grief keeps out everything else too. And one morning you wake up safe and alone inside it, and you trade every stone for one more quarrel with someone who mattered enough to leave." June opened her mouth, though she had no idea what she was going to say, and never found out, because a voice at her shoulder said, "Miss Hartley." And she turned to find Sabine standing there, with her tablet against her chest and her professional smile firmly in place, and in her free hand a cream-colored envelope. "I'm so sorry to interrupt." Sabine's smile did not waver. "Mr. Ashford asked me earlier this evening to make sure you had this, for the car and for your trouble, and to see that you got wherever you're going, whenever you'd like to leave. He was very specific that you weren't to be out of pocket for any of it." She held the envelope out. It was heavy. "He's a considerate man, Mr. Ashford. He always thinks of these things in advance." The world went quiet and precise, the way it did when a tray tipped. June took the envelope because taking it was easier than the alternative, and it was thick, and through the paper her fingers found the unmistakable, clean edge of banded currency. A great deal of it, more than a share ride fare, more than a car home. A number that would have made a lease renewal sit down on a flour bin and breathe through its mouth. And clipped to the front, in a hand she had not seen before, but somehow already knew was efficient and certain, and Caleb's, a single folded note. She did not want to open it. She opened it. "For the trouble I've caused you," it read. "Whatever the number is that saves the verb, this is more. You don't have to be anyone's sensible arrangement. Go home. Buy your bakery back. Forget you ever got in the wrong car. C." She read it twice. The cello played on. Somewhere Gideon was saying her name, gently, twice, but he had gone very small and far away, because the whole warm gold evening had just folded up around June like a table being put away, and she was standing inside the exact thing she had told him in the car she would not do. "Not because you paid. Those are different things," she had said, and he had looked at her with that recalibration on his face and said, "All right, I'm asking, not buying." And she had believed him. She had chosen this. She had stood on a dark slope 40 minutes ago and offered a thing no one had asked her for, and felt, for once in her useful life, like a person who could give instead of serve. And the whole time there had been an envelope with her price in it, arranged in advance, sitting in Sabine's efficient hand, waiting. "When?" June said. Her voice came out level, which surprised her. "When did he ask you to prepare this?" Sabine's smile flickered for the first time all night. "When you arrived, I believe. He caught me in the drive before you came up the steps and said to have a car and a token of thanks ready for a guest who'd done him a great kindness and would be leaving early." She hesitated, reading June's face and not liking what she found there. "Miss Hartley, is something—" "No," June said. "No, it's all thought of in advance. He always thinks of these things in advance. You said so yourself." She stood. The banded weight of it sat in her hand like a stone in a shoe, like the word steady, like every time she had been the thing someone reached for because they needed something, and never once the thing they reached for when they needed nothing at all. "Where is he?" "He went down to the boathouse to find Rennick. He seemed—" Sabine glanced at the envelope, and comprehension moved across her face, and with it, to her credit, something like dismay. "Miss Hartley, I don't think he meant—" "I know exactly what he meant," June said, and walked down the slope toward the boathouse with the envelope in her fist and the water knocking at the pilings, and every soft, moneyed voice on the lawn behind her sounding, now, precisely like surf. Like a thing that pretended to be gentle, right up until it took the ground out from under you. She found him at the foot of the boathouse steps, half in the light spilling from the last lit window, deep in low, urgent conversation with Rennick, who stood with his gray head bent and his hands in his pockets, and June caught the tail of it as she came. Caleb saying, "So pull it back, tonight, before Sabine," and Rennick answering, dry as a stone, "Bit late for that, I'd say," and lifting his chin toward June, and Caleb turning, and seeing her face, and seeing the envelope in her hand, and going absolutely still. "June!" He came up the 2 steps toward her. "June, that was— I need you to let me explain the timing of that, because the timing is the entire— When I got in your car," June said, "you told me to play along, and I did. When you told me you'd pay me, I said no, and I told you why, and you said— You stood in that car, and you said, 'They're different things, all right? Then I'm asking, not buying.'" Her voice did not shake, and she was proud of that, distantly, the way you're proud of a clean cut when your hand is bleeding. And the whole time this was already made. You had Sabine make it before I ever said a single word to your grandmother, before I chose anything. You'd already priced me and put me in an envelope and had a car warming up to take the arrangement home. Yes. He didn't flinch from it, and somehow that was worse. When you were still in the drive, I told Sabine to have money and a car ready. Because everyone I have ever asked for anything has needed to be paid, June. That's the water I swim in. That's the only language I've ever watched work in that house up there. I set it up in the first 30 seconds because that's what I know how to do. And then you got in the car and you refused the money, and I looked at you and I understood I'd read you wrong. Completely wrong, and I meant to unset it. I came down here to have Rennick pull it back before Sabine ever, but she got there first. His hand went to his wrist and pressed hard, white. The note I wrote before I met you, the envelope I arranged before I knew you, and every word I said in that car after was true, and I can't prove a single one of them now, because you're holding the proof that before I knew better, I thought you were exactly the thing you told me you've spent your whole life refusing to be. He looked at her, and there was no management left in his face at all, nothing arranged, only a man watching a rope go slack in the water. It's the truest bad thing about me, June. You saw it in the car. I manage people with the truth so I never have to hold a lie. And the truth is, I priced you before I met you, because pricing people is the only way I've ever known how to be safe. You're right. You should be furious. You should take the money and let Rennick drive you home and never think about any of us again. And it would be the sanest thing you did all day. The water knocked at the pilings. Up the hill the party glittered, oblivious. And June stood with the envelope in her fist, and her own wound wide open under her ribs, and thought about a drawer full of cards, with no return address, and a woman who had built a wall so no one could ever walk down her driveway again, and a man in front of her who had learned, in that same house, that the only safe love was one you could put a number on, because a number was a thing that couldn't leave you. It just left. She could go. The car was warm. The number in her hand would save the verb, buy back the blue door, carry her out of this gold nightmare and home to a life where at least she knew the weight of things. She could be sensible. She was so very good at being sensible. No, June said. Caleb went still. No? You don't get to do that. Her voice had found an edge again, and it was steadier than her hands. You don't get to hand me an envelope and a confession in the same breath and call it setting me free. That's not freedom. That's just a cleaner arrangement. The arrangement where I leave feeling sorry for you instead of used by you. And you get to stand down here at the bottom of your grandmother's lawn and be nobly, tragically honest about how broken you are, all by yourself, safe inside your wall. She stepped up onto the stair, level with him now, and pushed the envelope flat against his chest until his hand came up to take it. I told you in the car I'd do this because you asked, not because you paid, and those are different things, and I meant it. And you making it a lie afterward doesn't unmake it. So here's what's going to happen. I'm keeping the box, you're keeping the money, and I'm staying until Sunday. Not for you, and God knows not for that. She let go of the envelope. I'm staying because your uncle just told me what's at the bottom of this house. And it turns out the thing your grandmother is afraid of, the reason she wants you married and walled in before the leaves turn, is standing on this dock right now, getting lectured about her own freedom by the one person in your whole family who's too scared to take his. She held his stunned gaze. You want to know the secret you can't see, Caleb? I know it. Gideon told me all of it, and I'll tell you every word, but not tonight, and not for an envelope. You'll have to earn it. Your grandmother said you hadn't yet. She was already turning, already climbing the steps toward the lights and the music and the woman in dove gray who was, June had no doubt at all, watching them both from the top of the lawn. You've got until Sunday. And she went up into the party, leaving him at the foot of the boathouse steps, with the money in his hand and the water knocking at the pilings, and the whole gold weight of everything he didn't know yet turning slowly over his head, while behind her, unseen, at the very top of the slope, Eleanor Ashford set down her glass and watched the baker climb back toward her light instead of toward the waiting car, and understood, at last, exactly what she was dealing with. The room they gave her looked out over the water, and June did not sleep in it. She lay for an hour on sheets that felt like cool poured cream, listening to the house settle around her, the tick of some old clock down the hall, a gull complaining once out on the black harbor, the far-off knock of the boathouse water that had followed her up the lawn and into her chest and would not leave. At 2 she gave up. She found her jeans on the chair, still stiff with 2 states' worth of flour, and she went looking for the one room in any house that had ever made sense to her. The Ashford kitchen was a cathedral of cold steel and cooler marble, and it smelled of lemon oil and old copper and the faint ghost of last night's canapes. June stood in the doorway a moment, taking the measure of it the way she'd once taken the measure of every kitchen she'd ever begged a shift in. Then she found the flour, good flour, better than she could afford, and a bowl the size of a bird bath, and she began to do the only thing that had ever quieted the noise under her ribs. She was elbow deep and dusted to the wrist when the light changed behind her. I thought I dreamed the smell, Caleb said. He was in the doorway in yesterday's shirt, the linen jacket gone, his collar open and his jaw shadowed rougher than before. He had not slept either. She could see it in him, the way Eleanor had seen the day's sadness on her, plainly printed on the skin. You can't sleep in a house this size, June said, without turning. It's got too many rooms to be quiet in. That's not why you're awake. No. She turned the dough, leaned into it with the heel of her hand, felt it give and come back. It's not. He came in slowly, the way a man comes toward a stove he isn't sure is hot, and he stopped across the marble island from her, and he watched her hands the way his grandmother had read them on the steps. I've been up since you went to your room, he said. I've written the note to Priscilla's father 4 times. Each one's worse than the last. I keep trying to say it in the family language, the one where you never quite hold the knife, and it keeps coming out a coward's letter. He set his palms flat on the cold stone. So I stopped writing it. I'm going to say it to his face tomorrow instead. No paper to hide behind. June kept working the dough. Flour rose between her fingers, soft and warm-smelling, and outside the tall, dark windows the first grayness was thinking about the edge of the sky. That's a start, she said. It isn't earning it. I know. A beat, the water knocking somewhere below the house. Tell me how, then. I'm asking, not... His mouth twisted. I'm not going to say the other word ever again in your hearing. She portioned the dough into rounds, set them on a tray, and only then did she look up at him, both of them lit gray-blue in the enormous quiet. "You earn it," June said, "by choosing something before you know what it saves you. You've spent your whole life pricing the thing before you reach for it. So reach for something with no number on it, Caleb. Then come find me." She slid the tray toward the vast oven. "And bring your grandmother a warm roll for breakfast, because whatever she is at 7 in the morning, she's a person who was awake at 2 as well. I heard her floorboards." Caleb stared at her across the flour-dusted marble as though she'd handed him a map to a country he'd been told all his life did not exist. "You bake when you're frightened," he said quietly. "I bake when I'm anything." She wiped her hands on a towel. "It's the one place being useful and being chosen are the same thing. Nobody makes bread for a person they don't want to keep." The oven ticked, warming. And Caleb Ashford, heir to a house that ran on arrangements, picked up a warm roll with his own 2 hands, as though it were the first thing he had ever taken for free. Eleanor found her at 7, exactly as June had known she would. The old woman came into the kitchen in a robe the color of ash and slippers that made no sound, and she stopped at the sight of the loaves cooling in ranks along the marble, and something crossed her face that had no management in it at all. Then it was gone, and she was Eleanor again, straight and dove-still even in a dressing gown. "You've been in my kitchen," she said. "I've been in a lot of people's kitchens." June set a plate in front of the stool across the island, a torn roll, steam still ghosting off the white of it, a curl of butter going soft. "Sit down, Mrs. Ashford. You were up at 2, I heard you." Eleanor did not sit. "You presume." "I do." June met the pewter eyes. "You keep them in a drawer. The cards." The kitchen went so quiet June could hear the butter finding its own level on the warm bread. Eleanor's hand came to rest on the back of the stool, and her knuckles, June saw, went the exact white her own had gone last night around the envelope. "My brother," Eleanor said, "talks too much when he's had Arthur's whiskey." "Your brother loves 2 people who won't be in the same room," June said, "and he's tired of carrying them one at a time." She pushed the plate a half-inch closer. "He told me about Rosalind. He told me why you're afraid of things that can leave. He didn't tell me the last part, though, the part that's got a clock on it, the reason it has to be this summer and not next. He started to, and you stopped him with one word." She held the old woman's gaze and did not blink. "You stopped him because that part isn't 40 years old. That part is new, isn't it?" For a long moment Eleanor Ashford stood in her ash-gray robe in her cold, bright kitchen, and June watched 40 years of wall stand between them, mortared stone by stone. Then Eleanor pulled out the stool and sat, and put her 2 cool hands flat on the marble, on either side of the warm bread, as though to steady the whole turning world. "The card came in January," Eleanor said, "as it always does, at the turn of the year. No return address, as always. Except this one had a line under her name that the others never had." Her voice did not shake, which was worse than shaking. It said, "I would like to come home this summer, if there is still a home to come to. And a date. This weekend's date. Sunday." She looked at the bread and not at June. "My daughter is coming up the driveway on Sunday, after 40 years, and I have spent every week since January trying to have Caleb safely, permanently bound to something before she does." June sat down slowly across from her. Out the window, the harbor had gone from black to pewter to a pale summer gold at the rim, and a single early sailboat leaned out past the marina, white against the brightening water. "Why?" June said softly. "Why does he have to be married before she gets here?" "Because." And here Eleanor's composure thinned to the width of a blade's edge. Because for 40 years I have told myself a story in which leaving cost my daughter everything. That she walked down that driveway into hardship and regret, and that the walls I built around this family were mercy, that I was saving Caleb from the ruin she chose. Her eyes came up, and they were wet, and she did not wipe them, because Eleanor Ashford would not give a room that much. And if she comes back Sunday whole, happy, loved, carrying a life she built without me, and without one stone of what I offered her, then the story is a lie. Then leaving didn't cost her everything. Then the wall never protected anyone. Then my grandson will look at his mother, and he will understand that the driveway leads somewhere, and there will be nothing on this earth I can do to keep him. A single line ran down her cheek, unhurried. So I wanted him married before he learned that. I wanted the wall finished before she could show him the door in it. The bread steamed between them, going cool. You'd wall him in, June said, so you don't lose him. And in 40 years it never once occurred to you that a person who's walled in has already left. They just haven't picked up the suitcase yet. Eleanor Ashford looked at the baker across her marble island for a long, long moment, and then she picked up the torn roll with her ringed and steady hands, and she ate a little of it, and she said, very quietly, "Gideon warned me you had teeth." Caleb ended it at 11 that morning, in the boathouse, in the flat gold light off the water, and June was not in the room because it was not her room to be in. She waited on the dock with the summer heat coming up off the boards through the soles of her shoes, and the smell of creosote and warm weed and salt thick in the still air. And she watched through the tall windows the shapes of 3 people who did not raise their voices, Caleb and the silver-haired man and Priscilla, in linen the color of sand. She could not hear the words. She did not need to. She watched Caleb stand and not sit, watched him keep his hands still at his sides instead of at his wrist, watched the silver-haired man's shoulders go from square to slack to something almost like relief. And she understood that Caleb had done the thing he'd promised, said it to the face, no paper to hide behind. When they came out, Priscilla came first. She crossed the hot boards to where June stood, and she stopped, and the flawless, photographed face was, for the first time, simply a person's face. "He gave up the board seat," Priscilla said. "You know that? My father's seat, the autumn vote, the whole reason any of this. He put it on the table and pushed it across. Told my father the marriage was off and the seat was his anyway, freely, with the family's proxy behind it, because it was owed on the merits and not on me." She shook her head slowly. "Eleanor will be furious. That seat was the only card she still had to play with my father, and Caleb just handed it away for nothing, for no arrangement at all." Her eyes, cool and clear, studied June. "Do you have the first idea what it costs a man raised in that house to give a thing away and take nothing back?" "I'm starting to," June said. "He's never done it before." Priscilla almost smiled. "You should know. I meant what I said in the tent. I'm not a jealous woman, and I'm not a stupid one. I'd have been a good wife to him in the way that has nothing to do with feelings." The almost smile went, and something honest took its place. "But I watched him give away his only leverage this morning to be free, and I've never once, in 4 years of knowing him, seen him look like a man who wanted to be somewhere. He wants to be wherever you are. So. She stepped back, gathering her sand-colored linen and her dignity around her both. Don't let his grandmother spend you. She'll try. It's the only language she has. And she walked up the hot, bright dock toward the house, and did not look back. And June thought that of all the people at this terrible gold party, she would have liked, in another life, to have been Priscilla Vane's friend. Caleb came out last, and stood beside her at the end of the dock, and for a while neither of them said anything. The water moved against the pilings. A gull rode the warm air out over the marina without once beating its wings. "It's done," he said finally, cleanly. He kept his dignity, she kept hers, and I kept nothing, which is exactly as it should be. He turned his head. "I reached for something without a number on it, like you said. I gave away the seat." A breath. "It felt like stepping off the dock in the dark. I've been standing here waiting to feel the fall, and it hasn't come." "That's because you didn't fall," June said. "You just found out the water holds you." He looked at her, and the space between them went thin and charged again, the way it had on the dark slope, the air gone heavy as the minute before a summer storm. His gaze dropped to her mouth and came back, and this time she saw him not decide against it, saw him simply, deliberately, wait, because he had learned overnight that some things you don't reach for until you've earned the reaching. "Tell me now," he said instead. "The secret. You said I'd have to earn it. Have I?" June looked at him, at the exhaustion and the flour crumbs she'd watched him eat that morning, and the leverage he'd given away for nothing, and she thought that the cruelest thing she could do would be to make him hear it out here on a hot dock from her, when it should come to him up a driveway on a summer Sunday, in a voice he'd waited half his life to hear again. "Almost," she said gently. "You've almost earned it. But this one, you don't get from me, Caleb. You get it tomorrow. Just be here tomorrow. Whatever comes up that drive at noon, don't manage it. Don't price it. Just stand still and let it arrive." She took his hand, the first time she had reached for his instead of the other way around, and his fingers closed around hers, stunned and certain. "Can you do that? Stand still and take something you didn't arrange?" "With you next to me," Caleb said, "I think I could stand still through anything." Sunday came up hot and clean and blue, the kind of high summer morning that makes an old grief feel almost survivable. They gathered on the lawn again, fewer of them now, the 200 thinned to the family and a scatter of the closest. Eleanor's Sunday, as she'd promised it from the boathouse steps. The tents were struck, the candles were gone. In their place, someone had set a long table under the 2 great oaks, with a white cloth and blue hydrangeas cut fresh and heavy, and the quartet had been sent home, so that the only music was the water and the gulls and the wind moving in the leaves. Eleanor stood at the top of the drive in pale summer linen, straight as ever, and she did not make a speech, and she did not lift a glass. She simply watched the long white gate at the foot of the drive. And she had watched it, June understood, since dawn. At noon, a car turned in off the road. Not a limousine, a small dusty rental, the kind you drive yourself. And it came up the hydrangea drive slowly, gravel crushing under it, and it stopped a little short of the house, as though the person inside needed the last 30 feet on her own 2 feet. The door opened, and a woman got out into the summer light, 50-something, silver-threaded bright through dark hair, a linen dress creased from travel, a face that was Caleb's exact face, grown older and softer and unafraid. Caleb went absolutely still beside June. She felt it go through him, the recognition, the impossible arithmetic of it. That's... His voice cracked clean in half. June, that's my mother. That's Rosalind. She hasn't... In 40 years, she's never... I know, June said softly, and pressed his hand once, hard. Now stand still. Let her arrive. Rosalind Ashford came up the drive on her own feet, past the heavy blue hydrangeas, and she stopped a little way from her mother, close enough to speak and no closer. And for a moment the two women simply looked at each other across a distance 40 years wide. You still cut them too early, Rosalind said at last. Her voice was low and warm and roughened at the edge. She nodded at the hydrangeas. You always cut them before they've had their color. I used to beg you to wait a week. Eleanor's chin lifted a fraction. They wilt if you wait. They wilt anyway, Mother. Rosalind's mouth trembled and held. Everything wilts anyway. That was never a reason not to let it have its week. And Eleanor Ashford, who read people for a living, who never used the same knife twice, who had built a wall 40 years high so that no one could ever again walk down her driveway and be gone. Eleanor made a sound June had not heard her make, a small, broken sound with no management in it whatsoever, and she crossed the last 30 feet of gravel herself, in her pale linen, in her 70 years, and she took her daughter's creased, travel-worn face in both her cool, dry, ranked with rings hands, the way she had taken June's on the steps, and she read it. And this time what she read undid her entirely. You came home, Eleanor said. You left the gate open, said Rosalind. You've left it open every summer for 40 years. I counted on the drive just now. Not once locked. I always knew. I just needed to be sure you knew you'd left it. Her hands came up over her mother's. 1 card a year to tell you I was out there. 1 open gate a year to tell me I could come back. We are, God help us, the same stubborn woman, and it took us 4 decades to say a sentence. Caleb made a sound beside June. She turned and saw the whole thing land on him at once. The drawer of cards he'd never known about. The gate left open. The 40 years of a wall that had also, all along, been a door left unlocked. He understood it. June watched him understand it. The secret at the bottom of his house, arriving not from her mouth on a dock, but up a summer drive in his mother's creased linen. She left over a marriage, he said, very low, to no one. Grandmother tried to arrange her, and she left. And grandmother spent my whole life trying to arrange me before I could. His breath went ragged. She thought I was the same story. She's been terrified I'd walk the same driveway. And instead, June murmured, you brought a stranger up it in the wrong car and told her she hadn't earned you yet. Eleanor turned then, her daughter's hand in hers, and she looked across the sunlit lawn at her grandson and the baker standing side by side under the oaks. And 40 years of blade went out of her face, and left only a very old, very tired, very brave woman who had just chosen, at last, the thing she'd spent a lifetime walling out. Caleb, Eleanor said, and her voice carried clean across the grass, the way it had over 200 faces 2 nights before. Only there was nothing performed in it now. I owe you a truth, and I have carried it so long I've forgotten how to set it down gently, so I'll set it down plainly. I have been trying to sell your whole life to keep it. I priced you the way you priced her, because I taught you to. God forgive me. I taught you a person is only safe once you've put a number on them and locked the number in a drawer. A tear stood bright on her cheek, and she let it. I gave away your mother 40 years ago rather than lose control of who she loved. And I very nearly did it to you this summer. I stood on my own birthday steps and put a clock on your heart. I am ashamed of it. I am 70 years old, and I am ashamed. And I am telling you so in front of everyone whose good opinion I have spent a lifetime buying, which is the only currency I have left to pay you back with. She let go of nothing. She stood with her daughter's hand in one of hers, and she held the other out, open, empty, across the summer grass to her grandson. The seat you gave the veins for nothing yesterday, she said. You thought you'd thrown away my last card. You had. Good. I don't want it back. Marry no one you don't love. Walk down whatever driveway you please. The gate is open, Caleb. It's been open the whole time. I was only ever too frightened to tell you. For a moment, Caleb Ashford could not move at all. Then he crossed the grass, and he took his grandmother's open, empty hand, and he did not shake it or kiss it or manage it. He simply held on. And Rosalind reached her free hand to her son's face and touched the jaw that was her own. And the three of them stood a moment under the oaks in the high blue summer noon, a family that had spent 40 years learning the one sentence, finally saying it without a word. June stood a little apart at the edge of it, the way she had stood at the edge of every warm thing her whole useful life, near enough to serve it, never quite inside it. And Caleb turned, still holding his grandmother's hand, and held his other out to her. No, he said when she hesitated. Not the edge. Not you. Come here. This is family, June said. I'm the girl from the wrong car. You're the reason the gate got walked through. Rosalind's warm, rough voice, turning her silver-threaded head to look at June with Caleb's exact eyes. Whoever you are, Baker. My Uncle Gideon sent me a letter in the spring, said there was no one in this house brave enough to open a door, and I should come anyway. Then he sent me another 3 days ago, said one had finally arrived in the wrong car, and I'd best hurry, because she was doing in one weekend what the rest of us couldn't manage in 40 years. She smiled, and it was Caleb's rare, almost smile, grown wide and unafraid. So come here, wrong car girl. You're the least strange person on this lawn. June went. Caleb's hand closed around hers, and she stood inside the warm thing at last, not serving it, and something under her ribs that had been guttering since a sidewalk 2 years ago caught and held and burned steady and true. Later, when the long table under the oaks had been eaten from, and Gideon had wept happily into Arthur's whiskey and toasted 3 separate things that weren't quite history, when Rosalind and Eleanor had disappeared into the house to a drawer that needed emptying at last, Caleb walked June down to the water. The sun was letting down gold over the harbor. The boathouse threw its long shadow across the boards, and the water knocked at the pilings, and the whole evening smelled of cut grass and warm creosote and, faintly, of the shortbread June had finally, that afternoon, baked fresh in an Ashford oven and set out on the family table, where Eleanor Ashford had eaten 3 pieces and said nothing and meant everything. "I have to tell you something," Caleb said, "and I want to say it plainly, because I've watched my family nearly waste 4 decades on things they wouldn't say plainly." He turned her to him at the end of the dock. "I priced you before I met you. It's the worst thing I've ever done, and you'll never fully forgive it, and you shouldn't. But you got in the wrong car, June, and for the first time in my life, somebody arrived that I hadn't arranged. You cost me the one plan I had and every backup under it, and standing here, I've got nothing left to offer you but the truth, which is that I don't want you to be useful. I don't want you to be sensible. I don't want you to be steady." His voice went rough. "I want to be the thing you reach for when you don't need anything at all. And I would like, if you'd let me, to spend a very long time being reached for." June's throat had closed. 2 years of a word like a stone in her shoe, and here was a man handing her its opposite on a dock in the gold summer light. "Caleb Ashford," she said when she could, "that's the least arranged thing you've ever said." "I know. It's terrifying. My wrist hasn't stopped." He looked down at his own thumb, pressed white against the inside of his wrist, and he laughed, unsteady. "I don't know how to do this without a number on it." "You just did," June said. "You gave away the seat. You said the sentence. You stood still and let something arrive up a driveway you couldn't control." She reached up and gently took his worrying thumb away from his wrist and held his open hand flat in both of hers, the way his grandmother read a hand, the way a baker holds a thing she means to keep. "Nobody makes bread for a person they don't want to keep. And I've been baking in your grandmother's kitchen for 2 days. Draw your own conclusions." He drew them. He kissed her at last, in the falling gold light, the water knocking at the pilings and a gull crying once out over the marina, and it was the least sensible, least steady, least arranged thing June Hartley had ever let herself have, and she gave in to it entirely. And behind them, unseen, at the top of the lawn, 2 women who had not stood in a room together for 40 years, watched from a window and did not say a word, because for once there was nothing in the whole gold evening that needed to be managed at all. The Blue Door Bakery kept its verb. It happened without an envelope, in the end, which mattered more to June than anything. The lease renewal got paid the honest way. A line of people out the door on a Saturday morning, because a certain silver-threaded woman named Rosalind had settled 2 towns over and told everyone she met that the best shortbread in a 40-mile radius was worth the drive, and because a certain 70-year-old in dove-gray linen had begun arriving on Thursdays, unannounced, to sit in the window seat and read the hands of anyone who'd let her and pronounce them, invariably, in need of more butter and less caution. Caleb learned to bake badly and cheerfully, which June considered a greater surrender than any board seat. He burned 3 trays of rolls the first month, and stopped apologizing for the 4th. And the morning he made a joke, a genuinely terrible one, about a sourdough starter he'd named after his grandmother because it was old, temperamental, and refused to leave, June laughed so hard she had to sit down on the flour bin, and he looked at her sitting there in the gold morning light with such open, unpriced, unarranged wonder that she understood the guarded man from the wrong car had learned, finally, how to give a thing away and take nothing back but the sight of her laughing. Gideon came for the reopening and wept into the good coffee and toasted at last a piece of history he did not have to sand down at all. And on a warm evening at the very end of that summer, when the light through the blue door's windows had gone the color of clarified butter, and the last tray was cooling on the marble, June looked up to find a black car idling at the curb outside, the wrong shine of chrome, a door already opening. And her heart did the old lurch before she saw who unfolded from it, unhurried, dry, in a linen jacket the color of weak tea, holding a sign he'd made himself in badly lettered marker that read, simply, Hartley. "You got the wrong door," June called from behind her own counter. "This one says blue door." "I know," Caleb Ashford said, and stepped inside and let it close behind him with a soft, expensive click, like a held breath let go at last. "I watched you take the turn 3 months ago. I've been meaning to tell you. I'd take it again. Every time. The wrong car was the only right thing I ever did." Because here is the thing about the ones who arrive in the wrong car. The ones the world has spent a lifetime consolidating and folding up and putting away. They are not the sensible arrangement, and they were never meant to be. They are the open gate at the foot of the drive. They are the thing you reach for when you need nothing at all. And a wall built to keep out grief keeps out everything else too. But a door, left open one honest summer, will let the whole gold evening in. June came around the counter, and Caleb caught her hand, and outside the harbor let go of the day's heat, and somewhere a starter named after a formidable woman went right on quietly, stubbornly refusing to leave.